today I'm going to talk about a subject that's very dear to my heart, and that is working long hours. And specifically, what does working long hours do to your mind-brain-body connection, your psychoneurobiology? There's a lot of research on this. And when I started preparing for this NeuroLive, I tell you the research out there and the discussions that are happening are all over the place. And there's the consistent thing is that working long hours is not good for us, and we've got to change that. But it doesn't seem to be changing. It seems to, some countries, some organizations, some businesses are getting this right and some aren't. So I'm going to give you a general overview of what working long hours does to your mind, brain, and body. And just let's be aware of this. And when we're aware of this, let's make some plans to change this and talk about some ideas that I have for changing this in my life and give you some ideas as well. Okay, so as I was doing this research, as I said, I found so much on this. Then I found this really fantastic article in the National Geographic called What Working Long Hours Does to Your Body by Rachel Fairbank, published on August the 3rd, 2024. So it just came out just very recently. And it's really good. And it really covers this topic extremely well with lots of research links. So I'll make sure that we upload the link to this article so you can go through it yourself. But I'm going to literally walk you through this article because it's so well done, and then just throw some extra things in. Her little intro title under her subtitle is Experts Warn that working long hours can increase your risk of heart disease, increase your risk of lower back pain, and increase your risk of type 2 diabetes. And the tipping point might be sooner than you think. We have this thing as humans that we can just keep working and working and working, and we'll be okay. And we know we mustn't work so hard, and we know we must take breaks, and we know we must take rests, and we hear all of this in the well-being media. There's just so much advice on how to work less and rest more and restore. And I talk about this a lot as well. And sometimes I think we just need a wake-up call to really get us to apply all these things, to apply these, thinker moments every minute, and really resting and resting to restore, not just resting. And I did a whole NeuroLive and podcast on that. So you can go back and look in the Neuro Library and you'll find on the podcast on where I speak about the difference between resting and restoring and how important it is to restore. And there's lots of great tips there as well. But today I'm going to dive through this article and give you some interesting information to help you make the good decision and take the advice to cut back on your working hours. Now, I've been really working at this since I've been doing this research, and on and off over the years, I've really, caught myself working too hard because I am just one of those people. I love my work, and I'm just a hard worker, like probably you are too, and so many people are. And I don't wear it as a badge of honor. I just work because I like working and I like what I do, and it's just who I am. As personality-wise, I just like to get things done, and I get so engrossed in things, and I like the stimulation. But your brain and body do get tired, and you think that, the stimulation's enough to counterbalance the potential physical effects on our brain and our body, but it's not. And also your cognitive creativity and so on will not be as good if you are draining your brain and your body. Now, your mind runs the show, as you know from listening to my podcast and following me. Your mind runs the show. Your mind is driving your brain. Your brain is changed with your mind. Your mind changes your brain. Your brain's a filter. It stores stuff. Your body is a filter. It stores stuff. But your mind needs your brain and your body for you to show up. So we have to look after our brain and our bodies through how we manage our mind and our lifestyle, etc., etc. But it's a decision of your mind to manage your lifestyle. So it all goes hand in hand. And there's so much phenomenal advice out there on how to do that. But we've got this thing in our mind, and I don't know if you have it, but I know I've had it, where I think, my body will just handle that because I love my work so much. It's kind of, I think, subconsciously, in my subconscious mind, I was getting the message, hey, listen, yes, you love your work, but you do need to rest because your physical brain and body are going to tire out. So there was a mindset in me, and maybe in you and in a lot of people, that if I'm enjoying my work, that'll counteract the evil effects, that it'll kind of override them. And to a certain extent, it does. If you love your work, it does give you a little bit of extra energy to go a little bit longer. But also, if you really love your work and you really tune into managing your mind, you'll recognize that you'll love your work even more and get more out of it if you really do listen to the signs that come through from the subconscious, which draws on messages from the brain and the body. and the unconscious mind to tell you to slow down. So we've got to stop just thinking, okay, well, it won't affect me. It will affect you. There's no one that won't be affected by long working hours, and that is what the research is showing. And obviously it's worse if you don't like your job. Then it's even, kind of the downhill ride is even quicker. Okay, so let's have a look at just some of this information. There's a debate that's been raging, and I'm sure you're familiar with this as well, about whether it's time to switch to a 4-day work week. And there's been so much research showing how this is so beneficial, that people are more creative, you get more out of your job, people are just more efficient, happier, less mental health problems, less physical problems. And so there's really a big move, and some countries have even adopted this already. But at the same time, there's actually workplaces headed in the other direction, where, for example, in July, Greece passed legislation, and the link is in this article, allowing some employers to mandate a 6-day work week. So here we're talking about moving to a 4-day work week. Lots of discussions around that, lots of evidence that it's a great idea. And here in Greece, they're mandating that employers can actually mandate a 6-day work week. I mean, that's not helpful, and you'll see why as we talk about this. Samsung, the company Samsung, is requiring its executives to work a 6-day work week. And this raises the question of what impact is this having, these long working hours having on the mind-brain-body connection. In 2021, the World Health Organization, the WHO, and the International Labour Organization, the ILO, released a report that looked at the health of overwork. Okay, so the health risks of overwork. So there's an actual report that was released, and a report means that there's been research and analysis done, and it was released by the WHO and the International Labour Organization on what does working long hours actually do to our mental and physical health. And what the report found a lot of stuff, and there's a great link to this article, and I'm going to just pick up on a few things that they found. But the overarching thing is that they found that working long hours, and long hours can be defined as more than 55 hours a week, okay? More than 55 hours per week, okay? Was responsible for 745,000 deaths from stroke and heart disease in 2016. That's a 29% increase since 2000. Okay, so this is insane. So between 2000 and 2016, there was a 79% increase in death from stroke and cardiovascular disease from people working too long. Okay? So essentially, the study concludes that working 55 or more hours per week is associated, listen to this, with an estimated 35% higher risk of stroke, okay, and a 17% higher risk of dying from ischemic heart disease. That's when heart muscles get affected and when your brain gets affected with a stroke, compared to working 35 to 40 hours a week. So 35 to 40 hours a week is in the safe zone. Anything beyond 45, and when you hit the 55, your chance of having a stroke from working too hard increases by 35% and 17% higher risk of dying from cardiovascular disease. Between 2000 and 2016, there's been a 79%, what does it say here? 29% increase in deaths from working too hard. I mean, I can go on. Further, the number of, this is from the WHO, International Labour Organization, IL, saying that the number of people working longer hours is increasing and currently stands at 9% of the total population globally. So 9% of the total population globally work too long. This trend of working more. So we're in a trend of working longer hours. Currently, we're in a trend of working longer hours, and this trend is showing that people are dying from stroke and heart disease in increased numbers, okay, and significantly increased numbers. This trend of working longer and people dying quicker puts even more people at risk of work-related disability and early death. So there's a trend of working longer that's putting people at risk of early death and disability. Okay, so there is sufficient data to show that excessive work is the first occupational disease in the world. Did you think of it like that? So overwork is considered the first occupational disease in the world. overwork is an occupational disease. Different way of looking at it, okay? This is Alexis Descartes, who's a researcher at the Hospital and University of Angers in Serum, I think I'm saying that all wrong, based in France. As research is showing, even a 40-hour week is a problem, which has long been upheld as the standard. So we know the average standard is 8 hours a day, 5 hours, days a week. That's 40 hours a week. That's kind of the standard. And according to the WHO and the ILO, if you work 35 to 40 hours a week, you have less risk of dying from stroke or cardiovascular disease. And I haven't even touched on the diabetes type 2 and blood pressure increases, which lead to, cardiovascular and stroke anyway. But so 35 to 40 hours is considered literally the tipping point safe zone. But there is research showing now that even that's too much. This is where the argument goes to a 4-day work week. The hidden consequences of overwork. And even if I just may say here, a 4-day work week may be translated into, it may not be that you can work a 4-day work week just due to the nature of your work, but it means to get less hours in. So if you're working 8 hours a day, a 4-day work week would mean not 40 hours a week, it would mean 32 hours a week. And that's much safer than anything 40 hours and above. And it may be that you spread that 40 hours over 5 days or 4 days or 6 days. But to keep the hours down is very, very key. So as research is showing, even a 40-hour work week, which has long been upheld as the standard for work-life balance, may not be as good for our health as we once thought. So it looks like we need to reduce it or change how we're doing those hours. So let's have a look at some of the hidden consequences of overwork. You get direct and indirect effects of overworking to your mental and physical health. So your neurobiology, your mind-brain-body network gets impacted in a direct way and an indirect way. The stress associated with working long hours can have a direct impact on your health by keeping your body in a constant fight and flight state. Okay? And when you're constantly in fight and flight, that can be a problem. Okay? Because that means that your body is fight and flight in short amounts is good, because that means that because stress is good for you. It's when stress is not managed that when it moves, stress is good for you in that when it works in cycles of tension, release, then all your hormones, your neurochemicals, your neurophysiology, your neurobiology can work in balance. Your heart, your immune system, everything can work in balance. It can restore when we go in these cycles of tension, release. But if we stay in a constant state of tension, we're not going in cycles of tension and release. Tension, when we go into that, that's when problems happen. Because as soon as you go into a state, let's say it's the cycle. As you go into the tension state, for example, cortisol will increase. Now, cortisol increasing and getting your HPA axis into a certain state and getting your adrenaline at a certain level and getting your dopamine and a serotonin, that's great for learning. Your brain goes into a gamma state and a level of high beta, but it's for a certain fixed period to achieve a goal, makes you high alert, focused, everything in your body's focusing on that. And then there is, you breathe. So it's like breathe in and breathe out, okay? And that balances your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. The problem, however, is that if we are in a constant state of fight and flight, you don't have the drop off enough. So it may only drop off a bit, or there's a little bit of a drop off instead of a full cycle. It's just a bit of a drop and then it carries on. So you're getting this and eventually sometimes this and then this, and then maybe every now and then you get the full cycle. And that's the problem. So cortisol levels, say, for example, will stay too high. When cortisol levels stay too high, that impacts other hormones in the body. That impacts your telomeres. And telomeres are biological proxy for how we're managing our emotional health and the health of our cells, and linked to biological aging. And I've shown with my research that when we manage our mind and we get ourselves into these proper cycles, that we can actually lengthen and strengthen our telomeres. But if we do this instead of this, we're doing this, and then eventually that, and then maybe the odd one of these, your telomeres will shorten. Your DHEA will rise, your cortisol will, your DHEA cortisol ratio, your DHEA will drop, actually your cortisol will rise, and the ratio between the two will be a problem. Your prolactin will rise. Your other hormones other hormones get affected. ACTH, all kinds of, and that affects your immune system, your cardiovascular system, because everything's got to be in balance. Your biochemistry is thrown off. And over time, your body is so amazing, and your brain and your mind, that we can handle that for a while, but eventually it catches up. Eventually it's cumulative over time, and that's when the mental and physical health issues kick in. So the direct effect is it throws you into this a constant state of fright and flight, which increases your levels of cortisol, which then affects blood sugar levels, which then alters the immune system and the telomeres and so on. Okay. Over time, if the stress becomes chronic, okay, so if you don't have a break, if this is now the new pattern that every single day, all day long, you're in this sort of thing, and only a few of these now and then, that's chronic. Okay. That's ongoing. It can lead to a number of health issues, because that constant barrage on your mind, brain, and body keeps your mind in a messy state, keeps your brain and body in a messy state. Your networks are not operating functionally as well as they could. It'll affect your cognition. It'll affect your mental health. You'll feel depression, anxiety, hovering depression and anxiety. Joy goes, on edge, snappy, irritable. Behaviors change, perspective on life changes. All these things and it just builds and builds, and you have an increased vulnerability to disease over time. So unmanaged stress from long working hours increases your vulnerability to disease by anything from 30+%. Okay. And this is what this research is showing. And then over time, sorts of things that you'd experience are high blood pressure, because when you're constantly in that fight and flight, your blood pressure will increase. And then headaches and high blood pressure lead to strokes eventually, and so on. Not all headaches, but high blood pressure can lead to stroke, can lead to heart issues. That leads those physical symptoms will cause the emotional warning signals of anxiety and depression. You can also have digestive issues, disease, heart attack, stroke, sleep disturbances, and so it goes on. Okay? So that's the direct effect. Getting yourself you go into a constant state of fright and flight, and then you're in this constant state where your biochemistry or psychoneurobiology is off balance, and then all those things can happen. The indirect effect is that taking time, the time that you put into work takes time away from you for spending on an essential part of your humanity, and that is leisure, and relaxing to restore, resting to restore, and spending time with other people in a quality way. If you've worked so hard, you're so completely and utterly wiped out with exhaustion, you're not going to have quality interaction with other people. So that's the indirect effect. When you work too much, you don't have time to sleep well, because it affects your sleep, because you're constantly in this buzzing high state. You don't deal with stuff. When you're working so much, you don't deal with toxic traumas. You don't deal with day-to-day struggles. You don't deal with bad habits. You just keep rolling. They just keep on rolling. So this thing just keeps piling up, okay? You don't maybe play sport. You maybe don't have fun and go out with friends. You replace leisure time activities like going for a long walk with your family and having a chat, or, having a nice dinner with your family and taking time to have dinner with your family. You replace it with more work. This can compound the negative health effects. So that's the indirect. The direct effect is an immediate impact on your health that builds over time and so on. The indirect effect is that you're taking away a very important component of your humanity, and taking that away, it affects you mentally and physically and in so many ways, as we know, sleep, etc. So by replacing leisure time activities such as with work, this compounds negative health effects. So it just compounds. Everything is compounding. And as research is showing, these negative health impacts might not start showing up until years down the road. So they build in an accumulative way, and then boom, down the road, things are happening. So here is some interesting stats, once again from the WHO and ILO, that the majority of deaths related to overwork were in workers over the age of 60, okay, who had reported working 55 hours or more while younger. So you may be in your 30s now, and you may think, okay, well, I'm working 55 hours, I'm working 60 hours, I'm wearing it as my badge of honor, whatever, and I'm fine, and I'm still whatever. But you hit 60, and it's going to hit you. Now, I'm 61, and I've been aware of this sort of thing for a while, so I've had to really work hard at not overworking and making sure that I have enough time for leisure, for my family, for self-care, for all this kind of stuff. And times I slip out of it, and I'll be honest, and then I've got to get back into it. And make rules for myself, like come 5 o'clock, stop working. Unless there's a major project, then I'll put in a burst of work, and as a team we'll work, maybe we'll work to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock for 3 or 4 days, and then take a day off and make sure that the rest of that next week you're working under the 8 hours a day, and listening to your body and taking those thinker moments. The thinker moments that I talk about are where you switch off every hour for about a minute, where you just switch off to the external, switch on to the internal, let your mind daydream, activates the default mode network inside the brain, and the task positive network, which are networks that are very controlled by the mind. And when those networks are, when you switch off, you allow the mind to restore and regenerate and rebalance those networks, which then help to send a message to your body to rebalance, and you can think with more clarity. Every 3 hours, you should take around about a 10 to 15 minutes daydreaming. Just let your mind wander. Just let it wander. And then if you can build those in, those over time will train you to recognize when you've realized, help to train you to recognize when you're in an overwork state.